1992. The year pop culture basically looked at the 80s and said, thanks, but we're going to loosen the ties right now. The shiny, overproduced 80s vibe starting to fade. In music, grunge kicked the door open. Flannel shirts, distortion pedals, and hair that looked like it had just lost a fight with a pillow. Bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam turned angst into an art form, and suddenly the biggest rock stars in the world looked like the guy who had just rolled out of a garage. Rock music got messy again. And hip-hop, it wasn't just growing, it was taking over the conversation. In 1992, Dr. Dre dropped The Chronic, which, basically introduced the world to G-Funk. Smooth bass lines, funk samples, and a sound that would dominate the entire decade. Meanwhile, pop radio was still doing this thing. Artists like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey were putting out vocals so big, they could probably be seen from space. And then Whitney went ahead and recorded I Will Always Love You, a song that made every karaoke machine on earth immediately regret its life choices. And over on MTV, music television, music videos were still the center of the universe. If you weren't on MTV in 1992, you basically didn't exist. Now let's talk movies, because 1992 had some absolute monsters at the box office. First up, Batman Returns. Dark, weird, and featuring Danny DeVito as a sewer-dwelling penguin who looked like he had been marinating in espresso and rage. Then there was Basic Instinct. I know you remember that scene. Yowza. A thriller so controversial that one interrogation scene turned into the most paused moment in VHS history. And of course, Disney stopped in and said, let's calm everybody down with a cartoon. Of course, I'm talking about Aladdin, magic carpet, flying adventures, and a legendary performance by Robin Williams, rest in peace. Basically, Robin Williams stole the entire movie. Meanwhile, in theaters, sports movies were having a moment. A League of Their Own reminded everyone that there's no crying in baseball. Sorry, I didn't practice that. Although, if you ever watched Extra Innings, there absolutely is. And on TV, 1992 was peak sitcom dominance. Shows like Seinfeld were turning everyday nonsense into comedy gold. Show about nothing, which somehow turned out to be everything. Now let's talk trends. Fashion in 1992 is basically a tug of war. On one side, leftover 80s flash. On the other side, grunge. Flannel shirts, Doc Martens, baggy jeans, all of which I owned. And I was lucky enough to be able to see Pearl Jam. I never got to see Nirvana. I was supposed to, but didn't pan out because, he was no longer on the earth. Rest in peace, Kurt Cobain. Now looking like you just crawled out of a band practice. Those two words should have been said closer together. Band practice. There it is. Anyway, in malls, still the social headquarters of America. You didn't hang out online in 1992. You walked through the mall for 3 hours, pretending you might buy something while actually spending $5 on an orange Julius. And let's not forget about technology, because it was sweeping in too. CD players were replacing cassette tapes, video rental stores were everywhere, and a trip to the Blockbuster on Friday night was basically a sacred ritual. You walked in hopeful, you walked out slightly disappointed because the movie you wanted was already rented. And, in my experience, most of the movies I wanted to see were so bizarre, they were always there. And what else? Well, in 1992 was so interesting culturally. It wasn't one single moment, it was a shift in attitude. Music got rougher, movies got bolder, fashion got, messier. The polished 80s were fading, and the slightly chaotic experimental 90s were actually taking over. 1992, the year the pop culture stopped trying to look perfect, started getting real. Of course, I'm talking about the real world, which I was almost on season 2, but I was beat out by Puck. They decided that Puck would be more interesting than your old buddy Mac Ridge would. Anyway, that was 1992. Tomorrow I'll be back on camera. 1993. I'm on the road. Austin, LA, all those things. So, but I won't bore you with that. It's not as fun as it sounds, but it actually is. But we'll see you tomorrow, 1993, and I'll be back on camera.